Hi, welcome to more yoga with me, Emily. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you're feeling well, and if you're not, that you'll feel a little bit better after this class. We've got all things hips today, so particularly the front of the hips and the back of the hips, so hip flexors and glutes. Yay! Without further ado, let's lie down. Because who doesn't like starting on the floor? I don't know. I like it. Once you're on your back, think about where would support you best, whether you need your knees bent with the feet wide and the knees hanging in toward each other. Maybe you have your legs extended. Maybe you have take a butterfly pose even with the soles of the feet together and the knees wide. Just go where you need to go. And for a few breaths, inhale through your nose and exhale, sigh your breath away. Couple more. And continue breathing however you need to today. It could be in and out through your nose or your mouth. Start to notice how your breath is flowing, how it feels. And you might notice qualities like deep or shallow, warm or cool, moist or dry. And you might not notice any of these things, and that is fine as well. And I'd like you to draw your focus more towards your hips. Now the breath doesn't really go into the hips, but there is some natural movement that happens, particularly when we're very still. What happens at the hips with each breath? Maybe you notice a very subtle rock forward and back of the pelvis, particularly if you've got sort of lower belly breath. And again, you might not notice anything at all at the hips, and that is so fine. And last couple breaths here. And then gently bring a little bit of movement back to your body. However you need to wake up, wiggle up the fingertips or toes, maybe a little rock of your head to side, or a full body morning stretch. Until you feel ready to hug your knees into your chest and take a little rock from side to side. You could start to draw circles with your hips here, or thighs and the hip sockets. You could rock a little bit from side to side. Just moving wherever you need to move for a couple more breaths. Okay, and then bring your feet to the floor, hip width apart, parallel-ish, close enough into your bum that you can tickle your heels with your fingertips. And then just notice before we even move here, the knees, right? You can even sort of crunch up and look, right? They're not going to be touching and they're not going to be winging out to the side. I want you to keep the legs neutral. And sometimes a way to do that is to think of scrubbing your heels away from each other, and that will help stabilize the legs a little bit. Don't have to, right? It's kind of a weird activation, but it's a really good one. Okay, I'm going to take robot arms. You go where you need to go. Press the heels into the floor. Inhale, lift up into your bridge, and exhale, slowly lower back down. So a couple more of these. Inhale to lift, and exhale to lower. And the next time that you come back down, pause there. Okay, we're going to do another set of bridges. And you have the option to just come up and down like you did before. Maybe you lift up and pause at the top. Or maybe you inhale, lift up, and then cross your right ankle over top of the left thigh into a figure four position. Now that right hip is really going to want to drop. But lift it up, press your ankle into your thigh to lift that right side up a little bit more, and then uncross and then switch sides. It's helpful to kind of heel into the supporting foot in a little bit. Again, keep that left hip from dropping. Squeeze the bum, press your ankle into your thigh to lift a little bit higher. Squeeze the right bum, and then uncross. Exhale. Come on. Back down. Couple breaths just to pause. It was a neutral spine. And then hug your knees into your chest. So it's a pretty deep back bend, even though it doesn't feel like it. So I like to take a neutral spine before going into a counter stretch. All right. Grab the backs of the thighs. Maybe you start to rock and roll up and down your spine. You could roll to one side and press yourself up. We're just going to come to a seated position, though. So shift around to somewhere where you can see me. Excuse me. You might want to sit up on something here, something a little bit squishy, or just gives you a little bit of lift through the hips. We're going to come into like a normal cross-legged position. So not the heel tuck yoga version, not fire logs, right? Just like, what do they say in schools these days? Crisscross applesauce. Right? As if you're in school. So knees over ankles or feet. Doesn't matter what leg is in front because we're going to do both sides. Okay, can you find a nice long spine here? And then start to come forward on a long line. So fingertips come out to the side, wrap the shoulder blades onto the back, and then walk forward a little bit or a lot of it, right? It depends on your body. Maybe this feels like, okay, I want to stay here. Maybe you feel like you want to start to round forward. Now again, only go so far as feels good for you, right? You never want to feel pain. Tension is okay, right? A little bit of discomfort. If you have a block or a pillow, maybe you bring it underneath your head. But what I'm really looking for is release through the low back, but also through the hips, right? And it's going to feel a little bit different depending on which leg is forward. You might be feeling the lateral edges of the back of your thighs. Right? Maybe you've chosen to stay in the really long kind of active variation. If so, awesome. Last couple breaths, wherever you need to go. And then slowly walk yourself back up. Now I know some people are feeling like, oh, I can't go anywhere, right? I'm not getting any forward fold here. That's okay, right? It's your body. It doesn't matter, right? Where I go, where maybe your partner goes, or where you go. But I do recommend sitting up on something, particularly if you feel like you're just kind of stuck and can't go anywhere. It'll really help give you a little bit more mobility. Okay, cross the legs the opposite way. Oh, it always feels so weird. We have one way that our body is used to going, and now I feel like my legs belong to someone else, but that's okay. Right? It's good to work both sides, and both crossings helps balance the neuromuscular system. Okay, spine nice and long. Maybe you stay here. Right? For a lot of us, this is going to be enough with gravity working on the thighs and the hips. Maybe you start to hinge forward a little bit. Wrap the shoulder blades onto the back. See how that feels for a couple breaths. Feels all right. Maybe you choose to round forward. And it's not going to feel crazy different from one side to the other unless you have like an injury or something like that. But there is a very subtle difference depending on which leg is forward and which leg is back, right? It's going to change the angle of the knee, which also kind of in general changes the angle at the hip slightly. Last few breaths here. And then slowly start to roll back up. Unwind your legs, shake them out a little bit. Whew, let's come to hands and knees. So eventually setting up with knees underneath your hips, toes can be tucked or untucked, hands outer shoulder width apart or wider, and let's start to move through some cat and cow. So inhale, lift the tailbone, hollow through the lower back, broaden through the collarbones, and then exhale, round. Like your tailbone under, press the floor away from you. Inhale into cow, exhale, round into cat. So a few more of these undulations on your own time, on your own breath. Maybe there's some other natural movement that would feel really great here. Like a little wiggle of the hips from side to side or barrel rolls through your chest. Move where you need to move. And then come back to center. Take your knees mat width apart. Toes come toward each other behind you. And then start to shift your hips back for child's pose. Now you might stay in a really active child's pose with the arms really sort of pressed into the earth with the fingertips. Maybe you bend your elbows. Maybe the forehead comes to the earth. You can always stack your hands or your fists underneath your forehead to sort of bring the floor up to you. If your hips are really lifted from your heels, you can bring, sorry, toe cramp. You can bring a pillow between your bum and your heels. Go wherever you need to go. Getting a nice release for the low back, a nice release for the hips. Last breath here. And then plant your hands on the earth underneath your shoulders. Press yourself back up. Little wiggle or shake or cat and cow. And then come back to center. I'm going to do a little bit of single knee balancing stuff. So I'm going to bring a chip foam block underneath my left knee for a little bit more cushioning. And then on your inhale, step or sweep your right leg forward to half kneeling. Okay. Back out of your hips to start with, right? So you're really just in this kind of half kneeling position rather than a low lunge. Hug the legs toward each other. Really squeeze the bum on the back leg. Belly button to spine. Shoulder blades on the back. Maintaining all that. Then shift into that front knee. So really trying to target those hip flexors on the back leg, right? Rather than making it a very kind of artistic yoga thing, I want to make it a really active release of the hip flexors. That being said, if you want to go into your full sort of yoga expression of the pose, then by all means go where you need to go. You'll notice the more you squeeze the bum on the back leg, the more you're going to feel it into the hip flexors on the front of that leg. And then inhale the arms up to the sky, flip your palms skyward, grab hold of the left wrist with the right hand, lift a little bit taller, exhale over to the right. Send the shoulders back slightly, oh high. And then inhale back to center, back out of the hips. In fact, start to shift them back as we extend through the front leg for half splits. You could be here with your hands on your hips. You could have a hand on the wall. If you have blocks, you can bring your hands to blocks, or maybe the fingertips just come to the earth. Wrap that left hip forward, draw your right hip back, and then maybe point and flex the toes on that front foot. You can rock side to side on the heel, really massaging out the plantar fascia. And then a couple breaths here. Little draw of your belly button to your spine. And then the more you start to peel those front toes back toward your face, the more you're going to get into the calf muscles as well as the hamstrings. And I want you to imagine that you're trying to drag your front heel back towards you, really getting into the hamstrings, particularly right up at the origin of them, at the sit bones. Particularly if this knee is micro bent, right? You don't want to hyperextend it. The last couple breaths here. Okay, slowly back out of that stretch. Bring both hands inside your front foot, heel and toe it out a little bit wider, but keep the front foot parallel for today. And then hug this front knee in toward your shoulder. Now, some of you might find you get a little bit more space if you spin your back shin parallel to the top edge of your mat. And then keep your hips high as you exhale. Start to melt your heart low. Try not to let that knee wing out though. Keep hugging it in toward you. You might stay here. You might thread that right arm underneath the right side, bringing the hand to the outside edge of the foot, in which case you can really use it to keep that shin steady. You might spread your wings here. You might bind around that right side. Back shin can go wherever it needs to go. Couple more breaths here. Hips high, heart low. Now, it might not look like there's a huge difference in that, but it's not letting the hips sink is the main thing here. Okay, slowly back out of the hips a little bit. Little wiggle. Now, do spin your back shin parallel to the top edge of the mat. And then, this is what I like to call a Spider-Man, or a twister rather. I want you to explore. Right? Arms can go wherever. You might stay up high. You might reach under. You might try to find just somewhere that feels good, right? You could be super flopsy, but if you're getting a nice release anywhere on that right leg, or maybe even the back hip, wicked. Go where you need to go. And then once you've found a position that feels interesting, try and stay there for a couple breaths. And what we're trying to do here is to target the stretches on the hips on different angles so you get a release everywhere, not just in the same section of the muscle. Okay, slowly unwind yourself. Come back to center, spin that back shin so it's back to neutral. And then if you're kneeling up on something, shuffle that back knee forward so it's flush with the front edge of your block or your cushion, and then cross the right foot in front of the left thigh. Now I want toes to the floor, heel high, like a Barbie doll foot. That right knee is going to go out to the side. So your first option is to stay here. Maybe that feels like enough for you on that outer right hip. If you want more, shift your hips back and walk your upper body forward and then bow into it. So it's a figure 4 stretch, but from kneeling instead of on your back or standing. And then if you'd like to make it more active, think of pressing those front toes into the earth a little bit more. Okay, gently back out of the hips, unwind that front knee, come back to hands and knees. Oh, a little wiggle or shake or cat and cow. Notice how it feels. You might even take a little break from hands and knees. Okay, notice how you feel from one side to the other. Might not be a huge difference. It might be a big difference. Let's switch sides. So if you're using padding or a cushion, bring it underneath your right knee now. And then step or sweep that left leg forward. Again, if you want to go into full low lunge, you're welcome to. Otherwise, stay here with me in the active variation. Hug the legs toward each other, squeeze the bum, belly button to spine, shoulder blades on the back, and then shift into your front knee. Back toes could be tucked or untucked. And then if that front knee is wobbly, think of grounding the heel a little bit more, and then really start to squeeze the bum on the back leg. Right, we really want that super active release through the hip flexors. A couple more breaths here. Okay, sweep the arms up to the sky, grab hold of the right wrist with the left hand. Inhale, lift taller, exhale, over to the left. And then inhale back to center, shift your hips back, and then extend through the front leg, half splits. Again, hands can be wherever they need to be so that you can support yourself to find maybe a deeper stretch, right? Little micro bend on that front knee or even a deeper bend, right? My leg is not straight at all. Wrap your right hip forward, draw your left hip back. You can go ahead and point to flex those front toes if you want to, getting into the shins as well as the calves. You might rock side to side on that front heel, and then really start to imagine that you're dragging the front heel back toward you. The more that you're able to peel those front toes, right, back toward your face, the more you can get into the calf muscles as well, which sometimes can be so tight, right? Tightness here can cause tightness here, which can cause tightness here, right? It's all connected, even though there are multiple joints involved. One more inhale. One sweet exhale. Okay, inhale, rock forward, back into that front knee. We're going to go into that kind of weird alligator pose. So bring both hands inside the front foot, heel and toe out a little bit wider, but keep that front foot parallel. Really hug that front knee or shin in toward you. And then maybe you spin that back shin to give your hips a little bit more space. Maybe you don't. And then keep your hips high. Exhale, melt the heart low. And you can see, oh yeah, okay, I do actually get a bit more space this way. Maybe you scoop or thread that left arm underneath the thigh. Hand can come to the outside edge of the foot. Maybe you spread your wings here. Maybe you bind. Right, that back knee could be lifted off the earth, right, as long as it's not parallel to the short edge of the mat. Hips high, heart low. Couple more breaths here. Keep hugging that knee in toward you. Last breath here. Okay, slowly back out of the hips a little bit. If that shin is not parallel to the top edge of the mat, then go ahead and do that. And then let's start to play twister. Right? So explore any stretch here that feels good. This actually feels really nice for me on this side, so I'm just going to hang out here. Totally different position than the first side, and that's okay. Right? We all have different muscular imbalances, tightnesses from one side to the other. Once you find a position that feels interesting, pause there for a few breaths. Last breath here. Okay, however you need to, press yourself back up and then spin your back shin parallel with the long edge of your mat now, or the side edge. And then if you're using padding, shuffle your knee up so it's flush with the front edge of the padding or the block. And then step the left foot in front of the right knee. So toes to the floor, heel nice and high. And then that left knee, send it out to the side or even back a little bit. This might be where you stay. Maybe you shift your hips back and lock your upper body forward and bow into it. So a few breaths wherever you need to be. As gentle or as deep of a release on that outer left hip as you need. And then slowly start to unwind your legs. Come back to hands and knees, little wiggle or shake or cat and cow. And then if there's anything else you feel like you need before your rest, like a twist or a child's pose or something like that, feel free to go where you'd like to go. Otherwise, find your pose of rest. You could be flat on your back, legs bent or straight, resting in Shavasana. You could rest on your side or in child's pose or a seated meditation. I'm just going to stay seated. And then take your time getting there. But once you have found your pose of rest, for a few breaths, inhale through your nose and exhale, sigh your breath away. Couple more. And then let go of your breath control so that you can return to your natural breath. Notice how your breath is flowing, right? If you're still trying to control it, can you just let go? Same thing with the body. Notice if there's any muscular gripping or tension. If you're fighting against the relaxation. If so, let it go. And with each exhale, let your body melt a little bit deeper into the earth. And thoughts may come and go. Acknowledge them without judgment, but then let them go. Let them drift by you like leaves on the wind, so that you can bring your focus back to your body and your breath. Stay here longer if you can, 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you so much for joining me today. Namaste.